Welcome to the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. Terri Lynn Martin and her husband moved to the Lance area nearly 22 years ago and have no desire to live anywhere else, in spite of the 250-plus inches of snowfall each winter. Terri is currently a regular contributor to UP Magazine, Porcupine Press, where she finds an outlet for her humorous stories. Anthologies of these stories can be found in her books, Lady Chronicles, Devilish Encounters, 2021, and High on the Vine, 2022. Her full-length novel, Willow Mystery, a UPPAA romance, was just released.
Welcome, everyone. This is Evelyn coming from Wells Library. And tonight's speaker, Terri, is going to be talking to us about The Home Wind, which if you haven't read it, you are really missing out. As always, I usually hand it over now to Victor to speak a little bit about any UPPAA events or happenings that we need to be aware of.
Thanks, Evelyn. We can now start talking about our spring conference, which will be taking place on June 10th in Marquette, Michigan, at the lovely historic Peter White Library. And we have an exciting keynote speaker, Marty Ackitts, who is a two-time poet laureate of the UP, and he's going to be bringing on a musical guest or two. So he's really going to kick it off with a lively show. And then we have 6 breakout speakers. Some of the subjects include using humor in your writing, and Terri Martin will be hosting that. We'll have our self-publishing 101 for anyone who's ever wanted to publish a book by themselves. Tyler Tischler will be running that. He's eminently qualified. And Brandy Thomas will be on explaining how to work with an audiobook engineer, how to record your own audiobook. That's really exciting stuff. She's recorded 5 or 6 books for me. She's amazing. We'll have Carrie Pearson on how to work with an illustrator if you're putting together a children's book. And we have another woman, Laura Smith, on cover design, another important feature, right? Everyone knows people judge your book by your cover, so you better get a good one. And we're really excited to have 3 different panelists talking about how authors can work with bookstores from 3 different people from around the UP. So it'll be an exciting lineup, and the conference registration is free if you become a member at UPPAA.org. Just go to our website, click on join, pay the $40, and you get all the benefits, including conference with lunch. So that's my pitch.
Well, that's great. And how did the Dandelion short story contest end up? Can you tell us anything yet, or you're still reading and judging?
The judging is going to go on until the 21st. We got something like 26 high school stories and about 12 from the junior high. And the quality is really high. I'm judging all of them. I'm torn as to which one are the best. These kids are so good at writing out and out fantasy. That's where they really excel, like science fiction or sort of medieval Renaissance time period, and also just fantastical things that happen. So it'll be a treat.
Good. Yeah, I'm always glad that you guys do that and sponsor that. It's great to get young people writing, and it's always good to be with a lot of fellow writers, or I shouldn't say I'm not a writer, but with all of you writers here tonight. So for those of you just getting on, I don't have the book yet, but this is our book for next month here. So we're starting year 4, and we've got the lineup kind of figured out for a while. This first book is called We Kept Our Towns Going by Phyllis Michael Wong. In my email tomorrow, I'm going to send you the names of all the books, the publishers, where you can get the books, because some of the books this year are a little bit tricky to get. So I will give you all that information tomorrow. So you'll be all set for year 4 lineup, which is pretty exciting. And speaking about covers, I think 4 or 5, 4 of the covers are bright red. So I don't know what that means, because I was putting out my display today for, like it says in the chat, we are going to be on TV tonight, channel WZM, channel 19 is going to be did a spot today with me about our book club. So I put that in the chat, their URL, so you can click on that. And I noticed we have a lot of red covers. But anyway, without any further ado, I'm so delighted that the Terri wrote this book, because wow, it's like started off with a bang, and I didn't want to put it down. And I don't say that lightly, Terri. I've taught English for 24 years before becoming a library director, and I read even 64 books last year alone. This was a great book. I just loved it. I don't know, those of you out there listening, did a lot of you feel the same way who read it? It just, I don't know. We want to talk to you. Tell us the story. How does somebody write a book about a logging camp long ago with a white boy and his Native American friend? I'm an inquiring mind. I want to know, Terri.
Well, thank you, Evelyn. And can everybody hear me? I'm not going to.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So so anyway, I think something that a lot of us know is that you still have to research fiction. And I'm not sure I'm not seeing myself. Is that normal? I'm seeing Hilton.
Well, if you click in your right-hand corner, there should be a button that says view.
I mean, am I supposed to be on the main screen when I'm talking?
If you want to be.
I don't. I just want to make sure people can hear me. I don't care. I got nothing to show till I get to the PowerPoint.
We can hear you and we can see you, but there is a little button in your right-hand corner. It'll look like a movie clapboard. It's called view. And on there, you can see if you want the speaker view, which will show you large, and then all of us as little heads on the top, or gallery, which I call the Brady Bunch button, where we all look like we're on the Brady Bunch. Those are a couple choices that you have. And then there's immersive. I don't know what that is.
So I click, it says speaker.
Yep. Click on speaker, and you should see you as the main box.
Do I click full screen? I'm on full screen. Oh, let's not worry about it.
Okay.
As long as people can hear me, that's fine.
We can hear you and see you.
Okay. So this book, as I told Evelyn, this sat metaphorically in a drawer for quite a long while. I started out with a critique or writers group way back many decades ago, and published my first book called A Family Trait through the help of an accomplished Newbery winner who happened to be in our group. She got an editor to read it, and they bought it. So that was published in 1999. So they were interested in other books. So I think when I went to Hartwick Pines, they have a reconstructed logging camp there, and it kind of piqued my interest. So this was back before you could Google things. I went to the library and started looking at things and researching what life was like. And being into writing children's book at that time, I was, can you still hear me? My screen got weird. I don't know. Anyway, Holiday House, who did the first book, was interested in a second book. Unfortunately, long story short, the editor left. They kind of strung me along for a year and then finally rejected it. So I worked at Finlandia University and different things, and took this book back out when I decided to self-publish it. Rewrote it many times. It went through many format changes. And part of the reason I chose writing a book about these two boys and their cultural differences and how they help each other with the difficulties in life was because there was discussion. There aren't a lot of books for boys at that age. So many are geared for girls. They're the readers. So that's where the money is, I guess. And so that was part of my motivation, is to make something that a 10-year-old boy or 11-year-old boy or 9-year-old boy would want to pick up and feel, this is a cool book, for me to read about. And so that's kind of how it came about. I had a few trips to Hartwick Pines and got some information there and worked on this book. I have to say it was in the works like 20 years ago. And it used to be self-publishing, the cost was prohibitive. It became more affordable. So I did it. I worked with a professional book designer, but I didn't have a professional editor, and it was really a struggle. I mean, you have a friend read it, you know, and there's a couple errors in it, but it's pretty clean. But then all these cartons of books, you still have to order quite a few. All these cartons of books arrive, and there's still quite a few sitting in the closet. So I've had a few self-published books. I now have a publisher and print on demand, and I think that's been very helpful for probably a lot of us from an investment standpoint. But I really enjoyed writing this book. I don't propose to be an expert on the Ojibwe Indians, but I have some peripheral knowledge. I live in, basically the Keweenaw Indian communities right here. I've had some contact at the university with people there and different things, but mainly researched. I went to good old-fashioned libraries before you could Google stuff, and checked out books and read memoirs and journals and articles, and great. There's, like, if you read the book, there is some historical truth in it, with, like, say, the town of Seney was quite a town in its day, and other things are pretty fictitious, but border along historical accuracy. But it's not a history book on the UP, that everything, the logging industry up here. As probably everybody realizes, that era, this book was written to take place the 1870s. It was pretty devastating to the landscape, the way logging was done, and decimated the environment, and displaced the Native Americans in the area. And so that is part of the theme through the book too, that the boy's father, who, for those who haven't read it, I won't do spoiler alerts, but his father had sensed this destruction of the land, and sort of, even though he was a logger, sort of, he told his son, that this isn't right, I guess. And the son kind of carries this. We're kind of hoping throughout the book that, maybe there's some hope with him. And anyway, he meets this Native American boy who's basically come from an orphanage and is penniless, wearing rags, starving, sick, and he gets nursed back to health. But Jamie is amazed at the prejudice against the Native American boy and the difficulties. And so, without, like, giving the book away, because I'm hoping people will read it, there is a lot of adventure. There is a lot of burdens that these two boys carry at such a young age, and there's a lot of joy too, and friendship and character building. And I think that even though the era is many, many years ago, that young people today can still maybe identify with the difficulty in coming of age and not feeling you're a man yet, but you need to be, or in the case of a girl, a woman. And so anyway, the two help each other through their cultural differences to understand. And hopefully people take that away from the book and still enjoy it. Hopefully in the book, hopefully, is something that moves forward and that you don't have to plod through. And I appreciate Evelyn's, saying that she had no trouble. And it's about 147 pages, I think, so it's not too bad. But I went on, now I can go online and get things, and I did set up a PowerPoint with just some things, some photos and things I dug up that kind of represent that time. There's some good photos out there. So if anybody has any questions at this point, otherwise I'll go ahead and start with the PowerPoint.
I just like to make the point that you mentioned on boy books and girl books. As a teacher, before I retired, I always found that girls will read books with boy characters, but boys will not read books with girl characters.
Yep.
So if you want to appeal to both, you got to have boy characters.
Yep, that was something that I had learned way back. Like I talk about that writers group I was in, it was mainly children's book writers, and we dealt with libraries and booksellers and stuff and took that away. Yes, boys don't want to read about girls babysitting or something like that, that they had. I think the stereotypes have changed a lot since I wrote the book. I mean, the boys and girls can do the same things now. I mean, girls are in sports, and when I grew up, not so much, things like that. But still, and I've had adults read this book and say that it doesn't have to be a kid's book. That, and of course, especially if it's a family member, they're going to say, "Oh, it was a great book," but that it is a worthwhile. And I've had parents looking, I'm going, "Well, my daughter likes to read," and I'm going, "Well, what about, I have this book." "Oh no, that'll be much too young. She wouldn't want to read it. She's like really into older." And like, well, that's too bad, because I've had people say that even if you're not 10 or 12, that it's a good read. So
I have a quick question. This is Sharon. There was probably a lot of prejudice against the Native Americans. So what made the white boy, and I'm sorry, but I haven't read it, but what made the white boy become friends with what did you name him?
well, the white boy's name is Jamie, and the Native American boy's name is Greyfeather. And basically, Greyfeather took refuge in the stable of the logging camp, and Jamie came upon him. And first, of course, they tussled because Jamie felt threatened, and then realized the boy was very sick. Jamie's mother nurses him back to health. They become good friends, and they share stories and information. And so they were kind of forced together, and then they bonded. I mean, it was the only other young person in the logging camp. I mean, it'd be hard to even, it was very unusual. This book, his mother becomes the camp cook. That's very unusual, but it wasn't completely unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it wasn't totally unusual to have kids there. But mainly it was men. And so but that is pointed out in the book. I was always told, if you do something that's not the norm, just point at it and say, "We know this isn't the norm. This is my book, though, and this is what's happening." So
No, that makes sense.
And don't let the reader know, I know it's not normal to have a woman butt, and they weren't sure about it, but they were desperate, and so they took her on. So
that makes sense. Strange bedfellows.
right.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay.
Terri, oh, I'm sorry. Terri, I was just going to add, I never found that I needed to plod through the book. And I would better describe it as it's a family book, because I have found that I wanted to share it with my grandkids and my adult children, because there's a lot of issues in that book that are current today, even though they're old-timey. I really enjoyed the book.
Thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned to Evelyn, I put a discussion guide in the back with kind of the hopes that it might be used for educational, as a class read, that kind of thing. I haven't really had any teachers approach me and say, "Can I get a discount to get some books?" I would gladly do that. But I have read to class. I actually read this book to some 7th and 8th graders, some excerpts before it became a book, just from the manuscript. And the kids really liked it. "You've got to publish this, a great book." Mm-hmm. And they weren't really saying that. 8th graders don't say nice things if they don't have to. This was a tough class. So, that was encouraging. And that was many years before I finally got it done. But
how did you find the reception from other Indian tribes, or have you experienced either support or or the opposite?
I have not had it vetted, so to speak, by the Ojibwa. And I haven't really gotten any feedback. I do have a few people I know. I don't know if they've read the book. So I haven't heard any negative comments, but I can't really say for certain. I can't say for certain that any Native Americans in this area have bought the book and read it. It's in the library. I think I've offered it to the Ojibwa library. So, you know, that they might dispute some of it, but I don't think there's anything offensive and or terribly inaccurate. And so, you know, I haven't really had a problem with people challenging that aspect of it.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's very
so far so good, you know. And I, you know, I'd welcome that. But I didn't really know if it was appropriate to like go, could you read this and tell me what you think of it? You know, because you're Native American, tell me, you know, I just tried to glean correct information, and of course it is fiction. So you take a little license there, but anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe we could go to this PowerPoint if everybody's good with that. So I've been tutored in this now, share screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes,
Perfect.
Yes.
great.
Now, am I gonna be able to move the slides?
Yep, you should.
Okay, there we go.
Use
All
the
right.
Arrow keys on your keyboard. Or
Yeah,
page
I
down.
got the arrows down here, so I'm good. So there's a picture of my book, duh, you know.
Mhm.
Which I just copied and pasted that, Victor. I hope that's okay. So here's a picture of a forest. It's not exactly probably the way things looked when the loggers came, but I think this might be from Hardwick Pines. I'm not real sure. And then, can people see that at the top? The cut off?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I'm cut off on the top here. Probably because I'm showing it. Anyway, basically the Ojibwa or the part of the Anishinaabe tribe, which means first or original people, and there's three basic aspects to the Anishinaabe: the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. This was something I had just come across in doing after book research. The word Ojibwa, I never saw that before, but I do mention in the book that Ojibwa refers to the pucker and moccasins, but it has it's sort of metaphoric for something else, I think. But the Anishinaabe were basically hunters and gatherers, and maple syrup collection was apparently a very big deal back before logging really moved in on them. I've looked at that several places, and it was something that kind of continued even though they lost a lot of their land. They were able to still do that for kind of a cash crop. Like I say, they were hunters and gatherers. I don't think this is a really circa 1870 picture. I think it's kind of a recreation, but I believe that looks like a real canoe, birch bark canoe. This is some gathering rice. They still do this. I think that only the Ojibwa tribe around is allowed to do that around here. During the year 1860 to 80, over 1 million board feet of timber with a minimum value of 36 million were stolen from Indian reservations. They kind of, sometimes they just out and out logged over land on the reservation. Sometimes they tried to get the Native Americans to become farmers and cut all the trees down, you know, plow up the land. It wasn't terribly successful. They basically were sent away to this looks like a fairly poor camp here. They're living in rags. They don't have fancy clothes or anything like that. And it's sort of where Jamie or where Greyfeather, the character of the book, came from. There were missionaries too, and he came from a Catholic shelter, I guess you could say. And this is an old picture of a logging camp. And as you can see, like they used horses, they just basically used them in teams of 2. You can see this is quite a large one with quite a few buildings. So where they've loaded them on sleds here. I can't tell if that's a train or what, which my book doesn't involve moving them by rail, it involves moving logs by river. The picture of a logging camp crew, pretty motley. And my book, I don't have like 100 men at this logging camp. It's more like 30. It's just more manageable because having Jamie's mother, the cook, and him, the helper, there's no way you could handle that many people. You can see the 3 cooks right here. Can you see my cursor?
No.
Oh, you can't? Okay, over to the left, the 3 in the white apron.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, I can see it now. Okay, thank you.
And this is from Hartwick Pines. I mentioned it's a state park in Grayling, Michigan, downstate. And it's just a replica of a dining hall. And it's probably much nicer than what reality was, but it gives you an idea of the crudeness of the Spartan existence of the people in this. Here's a real dining hall. And it says the real king of the camp was the cook, and in my book it was the queen, and people were very, very respectful of her. Nobody gave her any trouble. They gave her son trouble, and up to 100 men. It's not just unbelievable to be able to do that 3 meals a day. Again, from Hartwick Pines, a reconstructed kind of kitchen, what they had to work with. It's quite impressive if you guys ever get that way, or maybe a lot of you've already been to it. I've been many times. I really love it there. This is a bunkhouse. You can see that instead of lazy boy recliners, they have a wooden bench to relax on at night, tell stories, smoke their pipes, and sleep in those bunk beds. There's rarely any windows even in these bunkhouses. It has to be a little rank in there too. And they talk about here, you know, they cut all these trees down. Obviously they didn't have chainsaws in those days, or the harvesting machines we see out in the woods today. They notched it, just like if we cut down a tree, if you're a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout like I was, you notched one side with a axe, and then you took the saw on the other side, and if you were lucky, it fell where the wedge was and didn't fall on anybody. They did that all day long. This picture, this is from Michigan Tech Archives. I'm wondering how you would ever get that tree out of the woods. It's an amazingly gigantic tree. When they weren't moving things in the winter, or if the snow wasn't real deep, they would haul out logs. It would hang from a sling under these large wheels with clear stumps, and they would pull the logs out with a team of horses. In the winter, they loaded them on sleds. I forget what this is, a cross haul, I think. So this is sort of, again, replicating at Hartwick Pines, replicating, you know, how it was done. These are all authentic instruments that were, you know, rebuilt and restored. This is a real life thing, loading them on the sled out in the woods. I don't see the cross haul, but. And in the winter, they use this to ice the roads. Again, in the book, they'll talk about this a little bit, icing the road. Put the water in the trough there and it sprinkle, they call it a sprinkler, I think. Other times they roll the snow with this to flatten it so they can move those big sleds to stack the logs next to the river ready for spring. That's just a scene of kind of what it looks like after they've cut down all the big trees. Those are pretty good sized logs there. And this was a quote from a story. Logs were loaded on the sleds by means of a cross haul. A team pulled each log up parallel skids onto the sled. Two men with cant hooks, or PV sticks, I think they're the same thing, controlled the position of the log as it mounted the skids. And another man called the top loader put each log in place on the load. Inasmuch as the logs weighed from a half ton to 2 tons each, it was no mean feat. And probably people have seen this picture. I mean, that's amazing to me. 2 horses could pull that. I think these typically they don't typically stack them that high. It was maybe for a photo op, but obviously they could. And that's the cant hook we're talking about when how they get them up there. I don't know how they did it. And obviously there was a lot of accidents and injuries, and it wasn't, if you broke your leg, you were probably not going to survive. Then they got things to the river. This is a lot of logs in the river. And they jam and they had to break them loose. And those who've read the book know that is what started the whole book out. And then after decades of logging, I can't see the whole screen, but Michigan was littered with thousands of hectares of slashed dead branches, leaves, and wood. In their haste to move to new cutting sites, loggers usually gave little thought to what they were leaving behind. By the 1870s, stumps and branches already littered much of northern Michigan. There was no longer any barrier for erosion on cut-over land, and the dried debris created an enormous fire hazard. Again, if those who've read the book know what happens when you have a drought and a wind and all of this stuff. I live in the woods. I worry a lot when it's dry up here. In 1871, 50,000 acres burned in Menominee County. I bought her book about the different fires in Michigan. There's a lot of them. And this is kind of, my book takes place, part of it, the second part of it does take place in this county and refers kind of back to this fire. And so I just did a before and after, and I still see with what I have on the right with the clear cut, they do that still. They don't leave a green corridor or anything along the road and leave all the brush behind. So, I mean, there may be people who make their living off logging, and it's fine. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I do worry about fire. We've had a few. And then I just threw this in case I ever do a school presentation. Only you can come forest fires. So that's it. Stop share. So, does anybody have any more questions?
Where can we get your book, Terri?
Well, it's available on Amazon with Kindle or paperback. Or if you want paperback from me, just let me know and I can send you one. It'll be cheaper for you that way a little bit, unless you like Kindle. And Barnes and Noble, it's also there on just on Nook, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And other there's other e-book availabilities, pretty much all the platforms I think are on.
Thank you.
That was really interesting, Terry. And I wonder, like, I know that my dad has a picture of some of his kinfolk that did some clear cutting up on the western end, and it shows like what you saw there with the stack of logs, and they must have had some kind of a pulley system to get it up, because I think a lot of them, it wasn't just for the photo shoot, so to speak, but I think that they really did pile them quite high. If they didn't have a log run, you know, to put them down like they do in Grand Marais. You're probably familiar with, you know, with that old log run that they have there.
Yeah, I mean, they moved them in different ways depending. Sometimes they built slides and chutes, got them down steep hills or into the river. But yeah, getting them up on that sled like that, I don't know how, if they couldn't have just used a PV stick to get them up there. They weigh tons, they'd have to counterbalance it. But you know, my book doesn't go into huge detail about logging. It just touches upon it. And so it's, you know, I just didn't want to distract too much from the movement of the story and get too hung up on explaining things because it's a kid's book. But it is an interesting thing. Now it's all done with machine, but back in that day, it took a lot of muscle. So.
It almost looked like ropes on the one where you know the men were standing up there. It's just fascinating what these men could do.
I don't even know
I
how
think
you
that's,
would do.
that was intriguing when you were showing, because those photographs are just, they're beautiful.
Terri?
Yeah, my husband found a really good website with literally hundreds of photos, and so I spent hours going through them because I didn't think you guys wanted to see 95 slides. So yes.
Hey, oh, okay. I don't know if you could see us over here, but anyways, as you were showing that picture, a patron in our library came over and he was kind of interested in the book and what we were talking about. And he says he knows how they get those logs up there.
Okay.
Tell him.
Tell us.
Well, that pile was definitely for show, but the normal piles, they'd have horses and they'd take a rope, they'd take two ropes and they would run it down, and they'd have poles laying, they would have two poles laying on the log pile, and they'd have a rope that went there and back. So as the horse pulled the rope, it was a double rope. So the rope went underneath the log and back up over the top. So when the horses pulled,
Just rolled up. Yeah.
it rolled the logs up on. The guys were really ingenious with the way they figured things out, and that was one way of loading. And then they used a tripod also with a pulley where they could just pick up the log and swing it onto the blade. But a great book for anyone to read, it would be John Nelligent. Oh, no offense against your book, but this is more of an adult book. Have you ever heard of a White Pine Empire?
No.
It's Bernie Hoffman was a librarian, and he had like library cards in 3 different libraries, and he wrote a book about the history of Crystal Falls. And he said some books are read and some are digested. He said this is the latter. He says this, and for a librarian to say that meant a lot to me. So I read the book. And John Nelligent started out as a cook in the logging camps. When he was 12 years old, his father got killed, and he worked his way up to being a big, right through the ranks to where he was at the top. He would buy millions of board feet of timber and send it down the river. And he was a good looking, he was a 6'4" Irishman. He didn't drink like most of the lumberjacks did. He was just kept his nose to the grindstone. But a really interesting book, A White Pine Empire.
So I'm going to put it in the chat. So I'm going to just ask him if I got it right. White Pine Empire by John Elgin.
No, Don Nelligent.
Okay, we're gonna get this right for everybody.
There's an Elgin Creek in this Iron County named after him.
Nelligan,
I believe.
Don Nelligent.
John.
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 Now I got Don. I gotta put John. Okay. And I'll send this to everybody and we can look up this book.
Yeah, you wouldn't be disappointed to read
'Cause
that book.
He says it will like it. Okay, there it is.
It tells you all about the like the log drives. Death was just a common thing that happened. He said when a man died, your eyes wetted, his quote, your eyes wetted, you bit your teeth and you just stepped a little more carefully, but nothing could stop the log drive. It had to go on. You could not stop the drive for the men. Because they do what they could to cover a man if they could, but there were many men that never were recovered or much later. And I'm sure after being crushed by the logs, there probably wasn't, it was an underwater cremation, really, if you really think about it, the people, but yeah, I mean, it was a really, really
good book.
It started, he was an Irishman. He was born in the 1840-ish time period. So he was right through the prime of all of the logging days.
Well, good.
And he was right in this area too. It's right. We're in Iron County, Crystal Falls, but he ran like the Fence River. That's where he talks about the man getting killed up there, and it's really, really good.
Okay. Well, we put it in the chat and hopefully some people can check that out if they're interested in more logging camp adventures.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah.
Hi, Terri. This is Maria, California. And when you visit and classroom, what kind of questions and response are you getting from your students?
Well, I've visited a couple classrooms. Like I said, I knew a teacher, 7th, 8th grade teacher, and I went to her classroom a few times. And I don't know that I got a lot of questions about the logging or this or that because I didn't read the whole book.
Sure.
But I would question them and say, do you feel like Jamie is prejudiced against Greyfeather? No, they say. And well, why not? That I would sort of open discussion about that. It's been a few years. I'd be real interested how it would go today.
Yeah,
but I don't
kind of relate to their own relationship with others.
Yeah. So, to me, you can lecture and tell them this is good, this is bad, but it's kind of good to just tell it in a story and see what they extract from it and discuss it. And I think I would ask them, can you think of something that's happened with you? It doesn't have to be race or this or that, just something that's happened to you that made you feel that way, So I think the book is good for that type of classroom discussion, that kind of thinking.
Thank you.
But thanks for that. Yeah, I'd like to get into more classrooms, and I haven't had a lot of offers, even though I think people know in my community know it's out there. And I think things are so difficult now to go outside their teachings. And I was on the school board at one of the small schools here, and they haven't invited me lately. When I was on the school board, they were talking about. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not aggressive enough.
It's all about marketing, huh?
Yeah.
Don't feel bad, Terri. Don't feel bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I live right here in Brimley. I've been a columnist for 10 years. Okay, I've written 3 books now, and I've never been invited to the school that I graduated from. So,
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't know. I don't think they appreciate the local talent sometimes. And
I think
the small little bird.
They get so focused on what they have to accomplish by the end of the day and trying to get through that. And I know a lot of teachers try really hard to bring other experiences in. But I mean, I worked at Finlandia University for 11 years. I brought authors in. I was on the committee. Some of them fairly, well-known authors. We kind of piggyback sometimes with Michigan Tech. I was on the campus read committee. They've never invited me to do a book signing. you know, and I've offered, I mean, I emailed the bookstore and said, you know, I'm happy to do a book signing there sometime. So
Yeah.
crickets.
It's their loss.
Yeah, I suppose I could just show up, you know, see what happens.
Ask Bob.
I don't know.
Anybody
And
else?
you know, I'm sorry, but in that one picture, I'm going back to the log. I thought I saw ropes. Okay. And I thought, oh, Sharon, it's probably just your imagination, but I thought I saw a rope on either end of those logs and what that fellow was talking about. You see what you've started, Terri, is
Yeah.
that you showed us these pictures. Okay. And we want to talk about your book, but your pictures were so interesting about the logging and some of the virgin growth that was cut down that, you know, you got to get us back on track now for your book. Tell me more about your book.
Well, these are themes throughout the book. You know, the book is really about the two boys, their relationship and their exchange of, you know, it's a brutal world that they're living in, but there is love and there is caring, but they depend a lot on each other. And Jamie, the white boy, tends to depend more on Greyfeather, who's become far more worldly through necessity and because of the nature of perhaps his upbringing. They consider him a man at 13, and Jamie's mother doesn't want him to become a man, you know, so you have all those issues that probably are still occurring today. And yeah, the logging, the environment, that kind of thing is the setting, the scene, but it's not a book about that. It's just the setting. So, you know, somebody else?
Yep.
Terri, I want to say that one of the things I really loved about the book was not just the relationship between the two boys, but that both of these boys have very maybe dysfunctional relationships with their fathers in different ways. I won't give away too much of the plot, but I loved how that played out in the book, the relationships with the fathers and the stepfather also, that he was actually a very, you didn't make him into an evil stepfather. I loved that he was a stepfather. And I loved my question is, I loved the fire scene. I thought you did such a great job with that. It was so dramatic and vivid. And I didn't even know that there had been a fire there in the Marinette, Menominee area. I knew about the Peshtigo fire, but not that one. But my question is, how did you decide like to tie these two ends of the Upper Peninsula together, Seney and Menominee, and where did you like get the idea to tie all these parts together?
Well, I think from my research back in those days, I think there was a lumber camp in that area. I mean, you have a logging camp and then you have the lumber mill. And once, you know, you have a choice, you can stay with the logging camp and they move around. But they decided to move on with their lives and go to the lumber mill. So basically it was roughly what was occurring up here. I don't say it's exactly, there was a lumber mill exactly. And I think I talked about going to Menominee and Neskanaba and different places that are familiar. And the Dunlap, the steamer that they took was a real ship that did transport people. And yeah, there was fire in Wisconsin, that fire you mentioned that starts with a P. And I've been doing a little more reading. I wrote this book so long ago, I had to reread it recently and drag out my notes. And I have things, you know, talking about Seney, and I have things talking about this and that I used originally from the book. But yeah, I just sort of followed the rough history of the area and how people followed where the work was. And I saw some pictures. I almost used one in the PowerPoint of people going to the rivers trying to escape all these fires, the Wisconsin and Chicago, that was horrible. And apparently a lot of the lumber to replace Chicago came from Michigan. And you know, the horses, everything going in the river trying to survive. And so that was, you know, something that really occurred. That's why I used it. I truthfully, and I won't do a spoiler alert, I'm truthfully don't know if Pete and Greyfeather would have survived where they went in the book. Nobody's challenged me on that though. So
I'd like to say, Terri, that from a lot of the research that I've done for my own books, that I found yours very, very believable. And a lot of the stuff was really accurate, right on target. I didn't see anything that I would have complained about historically. And it was a real page turner for me, and I did pass it on to my grandkids too.
Thank you. Yeah, I know Deborah brought up, she was one of the reviewers for this book, and she brought up that I mentioned the tooth fairy, and she thought, no, there couldn't have been back then. And she looked it up, and for sure there was. And I'm like, I don't remember if I looked it up, Deborah, or if I just lucked out on that one.
So sometimes we do get lucky.
Yeah.
I had an incident where, with my book Living on Sisu, where I figured that there was a shortcut across from Swedetown to the Calumet area, because there were shortcuts all over, and I knew a few in the town I grew up in. So I put in a shortcut. And then this guy approached me who actually grew up in Swedetown, and he said, man, I can't believe you even included the shortcut. And I was kind of going, phew.
Yay. Yeah, I mean, we've all done it, and we've all been caught with oops. And even some things get past Simon and Schuster. And one of my pet peeves is when people just presume they know something about something. And with some things it's okay, but I had horses for many, many years, and they have these horses either galloping for 20 miles, or I remember one that she reached forward and scratched the horse between its ears. I'm like, either that horse had a short neck or she had a very long arm. Because you like physically would have trouble doing that, sitting from the saddle and leaning forward. And so yes, there's many pitfalls. And this was, I mean, I was setting myself up a bit, but I just really felt I was really disappointed that originally Holiday House bought the first book, but finally said with this one, and true, the editor left that I was working with, oh, we've already got another book similar to that. And but it's New York, and they don't, you know, we all know that there's a reason that we self-publish or use independent publishers, because we have a lot of good stuff, and it's hard to get attention at some places.
One question here.
Well, I just wanted to say I kind of enjoyed that Sini trip where the boys had to go and get the supplies.
Yes.
That was a good part of it, and where Jamie started doubting Greyfeather, and then he kind of thought, no, I can't doubt him. I know, you know, but it was kind of a moment of, because he was listening to the adults around him.
Right.
So that was kind of a meaningful story, I think. And even when they got back, and he thought his mom would be mad, and she just hugged him, and he liked being hugged.
Like it felt good. And I think boys, you know, at that age, you know, they may push away a little bit from their mom, and then another time it might just feel kind of good to have your mom give you a hug.
I don't know. For me, nothing beats that beginning scene where he gets that mattress down and it gets it all stuffed up there. I mean, oh, you had me. I was hooked in right after that. That was great.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I was sort of living that, because I was going to have him pull this prank. And then I'm like, well, how the heck would that boy get that back up there? So I kind of painted myself in a corner there a little bit, and I thought, well, he didn't think it through, and he didn't get it back up.
That was great. That was
And you
great.
saw the picture on the PowerPoint of the bunks, and
Oh, yeah.
you know, so it'd be pretty high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
Any
I
other-
wanted to, but if it's okay, I just wanted to mention, I went to a logging museum a number of years ago in Minnesota. And in the bunk beds, this particular logging museum didn't have bunk beds. They just had a row of beds, and they were like doubles, and there was a rope going down so that, you know, there would be a man on each side and they couldn't cross over that rope. So I don't know if you came across any of that in some of your research.
No, I didn't. The museum at Hartwick Pines, I think, represented them as, you know, upper lower bunk. But I would imagine they did, you know, there was no no way that it was done in every place. It was whatever probably worked best, what materials they had. And, you know, this type of logging went on quite a bit beyond when this book was taking place too, in these rustic, difficult living situation. But maybe it got a little better with real beds, you know, I don't know.
I don't know. It was just kind of funny. And you'd see where they were hanging their underwear and whatnot to have it dry, their socks and stuff. And I'm glad you mentioned, you referenced Betty Sodders there, Michigan on Fire, one of her books. Betty was a good friend of mine. She's passed on now.
Oh,
but
okay.
She did a lot of writing about.
I still
Michigan.
have the book.
Yeah,
It's
a good
just
book.
packed full of information. The research, oh my gosh.
Well, she lived in the wilds with her husband for 30 years.
Really? That's
yeah.
interesting. I'm glad that you knew her. It's a small world.
Good friend. Yeah. Thank you.
Somebody else was.
I was just going to say there's a good logging museum right in Newberry also. You don't have to go downstate or to Minnesota to go to a logging museum.
That's right. That's right. As a matter of fact, my Roger Pylon was a friend of mine he lives in Grand Moreno, was instrumental in setting that up. And one of my dad's, one of these great big saws, you know, when we used to have we had a buzz saw and whatnot, is actually in that logging museum in Newberry.
Yeah, the one in Grayling, of course, I lived downstate at the time. When we used to camp, and we used to camp at Hartwick Pines quite a bit. They had a saw there, the steam driven saw, big building with that whole aspect too. It's been quite a few years since I saw it, but it was pretty impressive, but it looked exceedingly dangerous.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure.
So you say Tyler and Newberry, there is one?
Yeah. It's a fairly good size, you know, a couple, I don't remember, 2 or 3 buildings and some things outside.
Yeah.
When I went many years ago, but what amazed me was I got there and there was a woman at the counter and she said, "This is my grandson." He was like maybe 11. And he was my tour guide. And I could not believe how much information about logging this kid knew. It was amazing to me.
I'll have to check it out. It's good to know. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Terri? All right.
I think we're all wound down.
Yeah, but really, it's an exciting book, and I'm hoping to share it with some younger people that I know as well. I really liked it, and I think that it's just great that you wrote it.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming and listening and letting me talk about it. I really enjoyed writing it, and yeah, if anybody's interested in a copy of that, you know, I definitely would give you a fellow writer's discount.
All right, that sounds good.
Can you make certain that we have your contact information, please?
Well, you know what we'll do is, Terri, if I was going to send you an email tomorrow morning because I have to get your shipping, or what do you call it, physical address, so we can send you your check. And then if you don't mind, I could pass that on in the email to people too, if they wanted to contact you about getting copies of the book?
Sure, that'd be fine. Be
Oh,
great.
That sounds.
Thank you.
Wait, any more questions?
No.
No more questions. Okay.
If-
Or if people have more questions, is that what
Yes,
you're saying? Or if people have more questions, they can contact you. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And don't forget, next month we start our year 4 lineup with, and she was on for a little while, Phyllis, and then we kind of lost her. So Phyllis Michael Wong's book, We Kept Our Towns Going. And I will send everybody tomorrow all the information about year 4 and Terry's address. And thank you all.
You've been watching the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. To join or for more information, please visit us at www.upa.org or www.upnotable.com.